Well, here in Spain this week I'm joined by Hanson again. How are you doing, Brett?
Yes, I'm good, Howard. Thank you very much. And what about yourself?
I'm very well. Nice to catch up, as always. Well, back in January, the Spanish Prime Minister announced he was planning a new 100% tax on property purchases by non-EU residents, but no details were released. It was your turn in the studio then too, and we discussed what this tax may or may not mean, and would it go ahead? The government has gone ahead and submitted a draft law to Parliament, so it's time to take another look at this proposal. So, Brett, what has been proposed, and what does a 100% tax on property mean?
Yes, Howard, I do remember us talking about this back in January, just a few days after Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez called everyone off guard with his plan aimed at tackling the issue of housing accessibility in Spain. Back then, he announced 12 measures, and the most controversial or talked about measure was his 100% tax on the purchase of Spanish properties by non-EU nationals who are also not residents of Spain. As I said at the time, this was only announced verbally with no supporting documentation, and I have to say, when it was announced, it did feel like it was a reactionary response to the announcements made by Parti Popular on the same subject the day before. And since making the announcement, there has been debate as to whether the Prime Minister simply got his sums mixed up and was in fact referring to a 100% increase in certain taxes to be paid when purchasing property, and not literally a 100% tax, which would result in the doubling of the purchase price of a property. But on the 22nd of May of this year, the government presented its draft legislation to Parliament, and it does include a proposed new national tax aimed at discouraging property purchases by non-EU residents. And it is indeed the Spanish government's proposal to impose a 100% tax on the property purchases by non-EU buyers who are non-EU residents. If approved, Howard, what is referred to as a complementary state tax on real estate transfers would apply to second-hand property purchases and act as an additional charge on top of the current transfer tax. And so this proposal could, in effect, double the tax cost for non-EU investors buying second-hand properties in Spain.
So, to be clear, who exactly does this affect? Do British expatriates living here need to be concerned?
Well, first of all, this legislation will only affect both individuals or companies not residing in the EU. So this will not impact British expatriates who are living here legally. But if introduced, it will impact British and any other non-EU individuals and companies who are not living here but are wanting to buy a second-hand property in Spain, either as a holiday home or to rent it out. And for any British listeners who are looking to buy a property here with the aim of moving to Spain in the future, if this legislation becomes law, then it would probably be best to move here first, then buy a property, if the intention is not to buy a new property.
Why does the government want to introduce such a controversial tax? And what are the chances of it going ahead?
Well, there has been no doubt that largely due to a shortage of supply and a high demand, property prices in Spain have increased significantly over the last 14 years, and the growth in property prices, particularly in some parts of Spain, over the last 4 or 5 years have risen even faster. At the same time, Howard, a proportion of the purchases made over the last few years have been holiday homes. As Sánchez said back in January when he first mentioned these measures, in 2023, non-EU residents bought around 27,000 properties in Spain purely to let out on short-term lets. This is not only leading to increases in property prices, but also leading to a shortage of available property for long-term letting. I heard recently that in some areas of Spain, Spanish nationals are spending as much as 65% of their income purely to cover their rent. And this isn't a problem solely facing Spain. The continued significant increases in property prices is a major issue across many Western countries, what with 20 and 30-year-olds having to live at home because not only are they struggling to find property they can afford to buy, but are also struggling to find affordable property to rent. This and other issues creates a lot of unhappy voters across the Western world, and as a result, we have seen in recent years how most governments in power have lost elections because of voters' unhappiness with their current situation. Of course, voters are unhappy about many things and how they feel the direction of their countries are going, but there is no doubt that as a greater percentage of voters are unable to buy property or even afford to rent, then it is very unlikely that they're going to vote for the party currently in power who appear to be doing little to change the situation. So we have seen the golden visa in Spain go, and various initiatives brought in across Spain and other countries such as Portugal to try and diminish the impact non-EU citizens are having on the supply of property. And the proposal is part of a broader legislative package which also includes other fiscal changes such as raising VAT on short-term tourist rentals from 10% to 21%.
These short-term holiday lets are almost like the elephant in the room, or they have been for quite a while.
No, it's just that you're absolutely right. I think that it's having a huge impact on not just on available property for renting and buying, but also you hear of complexes where people are living long term, and then these places, these apartments are rented out for 1 or 2 nights, and there's a lot of partying going on. So even socially, it's having quite an impact on people living in countries such as Spain.
So, to conclude, Brett, what advice do you have for any UK residents who are hoping to buy their dream home in Spain?
Well, first I just want to stress to any UK resident listeners with plans or dreams of buying a home in Spain, I genuinely don't believe that this proposal is being implemented to prevent UK nationals moving to Spain. This draft legislation applies to all non-EU country individuals who are not residents of Spain. It also only applies to holiday homes or properties being bought to rent out. Whether Spain would like to have introduced such a law applying to all countries, EU law prevents Spain from making such a law against any EU countries. And in fact, I can actually put up a case that this legislation, if passed, could actually potentially benefit UK nationals wanting to come and live here. For example, if less holiday homes are bought as a result of this legislation, then it could be argued that in time there will be more properties available for purchase for both Spanish citizens and for non-Spanish citizens looking to live here, including non-EU nationals. And if supply increases and demand reduces, then maybe we will see a reduction in the annual increases in property prices here, or even see prices coming down. This will be a benefit for any British expatriates looking to live here, who will be able to apply for residency first, and once here, then be able to buy a property without this proposed tax applying. And as I've previously said, Howard, this only applies to second-hand properties, so this legislation will not affect any British nationals looking to buy a newly built property here in Spain. But as it is, Howard, let's wait and see exactly whether the draft legislation passes, and if it does, what will be the final agreed measures. I think it's worth bearing in mind that the Spanish Congress governs with 350 deputies, and to achieve a majority of 175 votes in order to pass legislation, the Socialist Party relies on a number of other diverse parties to support them, as they only have 121 seats. So obtaining a majority to pass this proposal may actually prove difficult. But saying that, and as I mentioned in January, many thought the Socialist Party would not be able to pass the solidarity tax a few years ago, and they did.
We'll keep our listeners up to date on that. And people, if they want to get some advice from Blevins Franks and personal advice for their own circumstances, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Probably the best way is via our website, blevinsfranks.com.
Many thanks, Brett, and I think we're back next week as well.
I think we are, Howard, so I look forward to next week.